Morning. Good morning. We're just making sure you're all awake. Hi, welcome. Thank you so much, Mara and Riga and Baltic Nordic Circus Network and everyone for having us here. This is really an amazing event, an amazing opportunity to get to discuss with you all. I hope you've had your coffee because this is going to get dense very quickly. So, oh, it's so quiet. Let's see. All right. So, I am the head of the Circus department at the Stockholm University of the Arts. We used to be called DOC, so you might know us that way in Circus. Now we're a university that has 7 different arts departments. And in the Circus department, we have a bachelor's course, a master's course, independent courses, and doctoral students as well. But my doctorate was not with Stockholm University of the Arts. My doctorate was with McGill University in Canada. And I'm going to be presenting to you the research results from my doctoral dissertation. You ready? Okay, cool. This is the title of my doctoral dissertation at the end, and this is what I'll be talking about: a theory of applied circus creativity. And the context was its development within a Bachelor of Circus Arts. So I'm going to talk a bit about the process of the dissertation in education, because I know we all have different backgrounds and education levels, and I am going to go a little bit into the methods. And if that makes you really tired, it's okay, just drink your coffee and then pay back attention when we get to the results, okay? But if you want to talk more about all the different methods that went into it, I'm happy to do that as well. So basically, I am an assistant professor of circus. I have a background doing trapeze and creation and teaching and teacher education, and then I got into research. And during the researching of circus in higher education, I got really interested in this particular educational space of accredited circus teaching in universities. And as any of you who have done graduate work know, you have to hone in on one little narrow question that seems impossibly small. So it's really specifically about accredited universities that have circus. And these universities have a particular set of challenges because they aim to provide students with necessary practical, physical, artistic, career management, health, all this knowledge to enter into the field and survive as a professional. But at the same time, they have to situate circus practice within sociocultural contexts and encourage critical thinking and help students usually do some kind of academic work, like some kind of presentation of themselves through writing and speech. So these specificities of circus education are like a lot of things, but they are really only specific to circus as a whole. And they're under-researched overall. You can go to the next. Oh, I can go to the next slide. Yeah. Okay, this is my master's, which you can also find. You can find all of these if you feel like reading through lots of dense material. They're publicly available. In my master's, I was in Montreal. I did my master's at Concordia University, and I looked at the curricula of the National Circus School in Montreal and the Quebec City Circus School in Quebec City. And I was working at the National Circus School, and I had attended the Quebec City Circus School. And from that work, there were still remaining questions that I had that were specifically around, bear with me, what else does circus education teach other than circus? Like, we know it teaches circus. We want it to teach circus, but I'm pretty sure we're learning other things at the same time. And so in my research, I had found, I'd started to do work with creativity and other curriculum, and it seems like circus education teaches creativity, but there's no evidence. There's this weird stuff with, academics where you have to prove it. You can't just know it because you see it. So I thought, all right, circus schools could be teaching creativity, but how would we know? So Well, we have to figure out what creativity is. Here's a definition that I used in my dissertation. I'll let you read it for a moment. So when we talk about creativity, we often mean originality. We mean try something new, develop new ideas. But I like this research definition of creativity because it says novel ideas, new ideas aren't good enough. I like things like that. They're not good enough because you can come up with lots of new ideas. You could say, all right, how are we going to fix the Canada arm on the space station? And someone could say, flipping pancakes on the moon. And that would be original and creative, but it wouldn't really be creative. It's not an answer to the problem. So part of creativity is how do you frame the problem in such a way that it can be answered? Creative solutions have to be context relevant. They have to be novel, new, but they have to be appropriate, useful, and valuable by people who know things. This is why we can talk about creativity in so many different domains. Creativity doesn't have to be artistic, it doesn't have to be beautiful, but it has to be useful, and it has to be a good idea. When we're talking about circus, what does that mean really? It means that the artists themselves is part of the frame of what is useful. Their own artistic vision, their own way that they work with their discipline. This is part of the creativity, but they also have to solve for what size the stage is, how much weight can it take, what are the rigging elements, what's the funding, what's the context of the performance. These are all other frames that they have to bring in to their problem. So I started doing this research, I started my doctorate in 2017, and an education doctorate takes between 4 to 7 years in Canada. And in 2019, I became head of the bachelor program at Stockholm University of the Arts, at Doc. And so I switched all of my research. I'd done all my candidacy papers, et cetera. I switched my research to only looking at graduates from the bachelor program at Doc. And the reason I called it Doc in my research is because that's how the students identified their education. Now I call it SKH because that's what we are. And I can tell you more about that at some other time. So from this, I developed 2 key research questions. And in these questions, there's a where, a what, and a how. The where is circus education. That's what we're talking about. What is taking place is about learning creativity. And how that takes place is through curriculum. So my first research question is, what did students learn about creativity within the circus arts profession during their studies at Doc? And my second question was, in what ways have graduates from Doc applied creative thinking, either within or beyond the context of their circus performance? Are you all still with me? Yeah, okay. Well, it's so quiet. So this is about the educational experience, and I would love to talk a lot about curriculum as well. I'm really into that framework of how we understand the theory of education through curriculum development. Ooh, too fast. But first I'm going to tell you the really nitty-gritty bits. So I used constructivist grounded theory methodology. Everybody knows what that is, right? I interviewed 12 different graduates from Doc's BA in Circus that had graduated between the years of 2008 and 2012. So at least one from every cohort between those years. And my position as head of the BA began in 2019, so I wasn't in conflict with any of the results in that way. The participants all self-selected, but then the interviews happened during the pandemic, so it was really quite interesting to have people that chose to be part of it, and then they were in the pandemic during interviews, and all this other interesting stuff came out that I was really happy to find. It was really invaluable. So in grounded theory methodology, we're in a qualitative research paradigm. That means we're interested in what happened, not how many what's happened. Quantitative is like, how many? But qualitative is, of what? And then artistic research is a whole other thing that, come to my university, we'll talk about that. But I'm going to talk about the qualitative paradigm first. And grounded theory, constructivist grounded theory means you interview a bunch of people, you find out about information, and you start to do coding of the text. You start to say, okay, well, what themes are coming up and how are they related? And you're comparing the different interviews with each other, and you're finding these chunks of information, and you're building out of the interviews a theory that comes from this space. So the theory is grounded in the interviews from the participants. That's all grounded theory means. And grounded theory comes with a constant comparison analysis. So we have over here, the universities really like little diagrams. My supervisors were like, can you do a diagram? So I did. So this is the constructivist grounded theory methodology. This is the qualitative and pragmatist constructivist paradigm I have. And this is my first question. So what I did is I interviewed a bunch of people around the first question, and then I did my constant comparative analysis, which is like, okay, you said this in the interviews, and you said this in the interviews, and okay, these themes are coming out, and are they similar, and do I have enough information about it? But then I also skipped out of the normal way you're supposed to do it, because I'm a circus person. And I did some directed analysis, which was where I said, this is the definition that I'm using of creativity. How are these participants responding to that? Are they saying the same thing? So instead of it coming out of the interviews, I imposed a question on the interviews. And then I made more codes, and then those became categories. And then I turned the categories into narrative vignettes before I developed the theory. Some of the participants shared rather sensitive information, and I tried to collect them into stories that were resonant rather than have one person, to just have one person's interview. This was to also protect the participants a bit. The circus community is so small. If someone's like, and then I was a juggler during this time, and then I have this opinion, everyone knows who it is. So this was a way of me trying to share the results as broadly as possible while also making sure people had the confidentiality that they wanted. Goodness, I have to move much faster here. Okay, so 3 themes came out. Learning creativity, creative identity, and creative practice. And the theme learning creativity collected all of the categories where participants describe learning about creativity within doc over here. So they describe learning, I framed it in terms of different curriculum theory, explicit, implicit, and null curriculum. Then we have creative identity, which included all of their beliefs about themselves and others and about what creativity was, all their own definitions. And then there was a final theme of creative practice, where they described experiences of their practice of creativity both within and beyond school. And so the resulting theory of applied circus creativity describes the way participants used this methodology of creativity that they learned from circus and then applied it more broadly into other areas of their lives. So in a doctorate, one has to demonstrate original knowledge. Like at McGill, they literally have a page that says, what's the original knowledge, so that no one is confused about it. For this one, is that this theory contributes to original knowledge by theorizing the way in which creative processes are being learned during higher education in circus and within circus disciplines, and yet being applied more extensively in professional work. And it marks a pathway by which domain-specific creative practice, so on your Chinese pole or juggling, becomes domain-general approach to problem solving. Okay, how am I going to get work during the pandemic? How am I going to reframe after this accident? All those different things. There are a few other ways, but I see I'm looking at the time here. These were a few other contributions that I'd be happy to talk about more in the workshop I'm going to do this afternoon or later this morning, which was about including student voice as part of the way that they understood their identity as artists, the feeling that students had of being creative, as well as this comes as no shock, an opposition to institutionalization. Was really interesting to me as an aside that Circus people understood themselves as Circus doesn't fit into institution, so it's because we're Circus. But a lot of people don't fit into institution. There are a lot of people that don't feel institutions were made for them. And it's true, most institutions weren't. So to look at the reasons that Circus had to oppose knowledge hierarchies had to do with their prioritization of their own practice and not feeling that a university frame was prioritizing practice, even while the university was prioritizing practice, was shifting its curriculum to make sure practice was valued. So the major contribution from this, and the thing that I think is most valuable for us to take away as Circus educators, as people who are thinking about what Circus contributes, especially in a very chaotic time that we live in, is that creativity is the means by which future problems will be solved, right? But what we find in creativity research is that unless you're learning creative methodology within the domain you're using, it doesn't transfer well. You can't learn poetry, creative methods in poetry, and assume it will help your engineering. But you can learn creative methods within engineering, and it helps you in your engineering be more creative. Except what I saw in these Circus people was that they learned the creative methods in the work we're all doing, where we teach them about disciplines, we teach them how to approach their disciplines, work with different artistic methods, have different challenges, different task-based work, where they have to constantly be problem-solving with other people and including really diverse knowledge domains in Circus. Very few fields have this many types of knowledge that we're asking our students to learn. And that created a situation where they become accustomed to pulling in new types of information into their creative problem solving, which sets them up in their professional lives to be able to solve more types of problems and transfer into other domains, which, forgive me for maybe exaggerating, but is exactly what we need in the world today. We need people that are able and willing to incorporate new types of knowledge to solve problems that are arising that we can't predict. So I think this is a very positive, there were a bunch of things I was going to say, but I'm going to just skip to there so that Aurélie has time. But I think that this is a way we can think about what are we doing in Circus and higher education. We know that in youth and recreational Circus, there's amazing outcomes on self-esteem, community, well-being, but we haven't really looked at the ways higher education also prepares us as humans and artists to face the challenges of the world. And I'm really happy to have been able to do this research at Stockholm University of the Arts and to be able to share it with you today, and hopefully it will be the beginning of many more conversations about this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alisan. You do have more time if you need.
Oh, do I? Okay.
Yeah, you do. The time goes not backwards, but forwards.
Oh, there are questions that can happen.
Yes, that's what we can do.
Do you
So
have questions?
me
I can
and
keep
Ilse,
talking.
we have a microphone, so we can pass them around in the room. So this is a time where you can actually ask all the details to Alisan and all the questions. So if you can just raise your hands, who has a question, and I'm going to bring you the microphone.
Hi, Alisan.
Hi, Daniel.
Have you considered specific actions that address this creative principle outside of the domains of the students to develop their creativity within the school?
Yes. The ways that I found that it was fostered in Doc was the iteration of task-based activity in their discipline, followed by feedback and then rebuilding the task. So the basic creative cycle, right? Like come up with an idea, do the thing, get feedback, come up with the idea, refine the idea, keep going. But this frame in Circus education where people are asked to include more and more things as time goes on, and ideally to justify the work they're doing and how it relates to the task, helped them think through the process and choices they were making. So even more concretely, There were people I interviewed that said things like, I wanted to work with environmental concepts, and I created a presentation where I was then raked across the coals by other students that said, this is not environmental at all, this doesn't meet your own, and not even the teachers, other students, this doesn't meet your goals. And that changed how I was thinking about what my work meant on stage and how it related to my own values. And then the next time I did that project, I brought a different set of ideas to it. And so they were expanding their resources, their inclusion of different factors in their actual final outcome. So this constant iteration, and this is what the doc curriculum had a lot of, is every couple of weeks there'd be a presentation, and it was a task-based presentation. So students would be given anywhere from do your discipline without your discipline, or go to the Modern Art Museum and create a piece based on something you saw there. So they were constantly being given provocations, and then they had to justify their choices when they were doing the work. Did that answer your question? Yeah, okay.
Is there some other questions?
I can keep talking.
I'm just giving it time.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome.
I was wondering if there is a correlation between having a space to fail, which is something that I feel like in Circus we have a lot this space to try things and not succeed in a way, whereas in my engineering degree, you cannot really fail because it means lives are, your airplane is crashing and people are dying. So yeah, I was wondering if you found a correlation between having an education that gives you 3 years to try things and fail and creativity. Yeah.
100%. Except not, because it was qualitative and not quantitative. So the majority of the time, yes. Yes, excellent question. Failure was a really big part, and in fact, in the interview guide that I made, I specifically asked them about challenges or to describe a failure and how they overcame it, both in their school and in their professional life. And they talked quite a lot about the difficulty of failure, but the way that it was hard for some people to describe what a failure was. There was one person who said, I think my failure was trying to do the different tasks in school exactly as they were asked, instead of doing them in a way that I wanted to for my own art. So it's a very meta concept of failure. And other people described, like the one I just said about the environment, that kind of failure. But failure wasn't a word that most of the people identified with directly. Challenges they identified with. Failure, they'd say, yeah, I guess I failed at a class, kind of. But this is also relevant, is the Stockholm University of the Arts, all of our courses are pass-fail. We don't have grades. And that creates a situation where the students knew that if they did something, it could go terribly. They still passed the class. The point wasn't that it would be the best work they'd ever done. The point was that they tried something, and if it failed to do the thing that was achieved, that they had intended, then there's the discussion around why, and that's the more interesting bit. So the failure wasn't set up as a threat of being kicked out of the school or a threat of there not being a degree. It was more on the way to their kind of artistic vision. And it gave what they described. I was looking for the exact quotation I had in here, but I can't seem to find it. They described that the importance of a place where they can recover from failure or from any ideas of failure. It's circus school, and in all of our circus schools, I don't know if you know this, but we work with humans. Humans are a little complicated. So there was some sense of the school failing them, or interpersonal things between students that were difficult. And so those came up quite often, more than the curriculum. is the context of their particular school. So in a situation where there was a major injury that happened, that affected everybody for 2 different cohorts. And so they spoke about the school failing them in terms of communicating about certain things. And that would be also really interesting research to try to look into these different expectations and levels. And I think all of you who are part of circus schools know we're looking into those things, like how do we articulate what the different responsibilities and communication strategies are. The place to learn what failure is, and that it's not the end of a process, but it's an essential part of the process, that is in art schools. It really is in art schools, and I worry that we move away from it in some ways when we don't have a critical discourse around what the goals of a certain task or education are, so that students have the opportunity to fail, so they also have the opportunity to succeed. Because where there is no opportunity to miss the mark, it's not very validating to achieve it. So even though we're pass-fail, the students are very hard on themselves and hard on each other when they're not meeting their actual aims. I answered a lot of different things than just the question you asked.
Hi, Alisan.
Hi, Marco.
My question is about creativity and obligation.
Great.
It's a common sense or something that we expect that in any educational process that creativity should be part of this, especially in arts. But we also see in the last decades a important pressure to be creative. So we are moving from creativity as part and fluid part, organic part of a process, to be a obligation or an oppression. Did you see any of these discussions in the data you get?
That's a great question. There was an article recently published in the Cal's Circus journal, I think from a student at a circus school that was talking about exactly this, the feeling of there being so much pressure to be original that they didn't feel they were able to explore their own artistic identity. It didn't come up at all in the interviews that I did, which is an interesting thing. This is one of the challenges of any research. You can't talk about the things that didn't come up, right? Like there's so many questions I had. I'm like, but no one said anything. I wanted to look more at gender stuff. No, none of it came up. If I'm going to answer that question based on my research, but not from the research, we have to think about what circus has been over time. And if you stretch back and think about classical circus and what classical circus offered, the presentation of classical circus to the audience was, this is new, this is the first time ever, this is original, this is unique, you've never seen this before. Classical circus has a marketing presence that tells you you're seeing something new and amazing and wonderful. But it can't be true all the time. It's part of the ticket price, is that you're getting something new and wonderful. For the artists themselves, very few of them recreated acts. Many of them bought acts from other people or learned their parents' acts or were incorporated into those acts. Acts were a very different thing even than what we have now. It might be a few different technical movements with very little connecting choreography. The contemporary circus and contemporary circus education, I think we sometimes forget the roots that we have and how radically different what we're doing now is from classical circus. This idea that we can escape to the circus and have freedom, not true for classical circus, and sometimes true for contemporary circus, but still not always. And so this idea of originality, I wonder if we haven't marketed it to ourselves because we bought into the same idea that was marketed out, as in this is always, always new, but it wasn't actually true on the inside of the classical circus. With that said, in circus schools, I think it depends on the school how much that incentive is coming from the school itself. In my experience, it's very driven by the students, that they're imposing it, or they have the impression that it's what the school wants, but it's actually what they want. They want to differentiate themselves. They need to leave a mark. They are not in competition, per se. That's also something interesting. It came out of Amanda Langlois' research with the National Circus School, that people, even in the same discipline, didn't feel they were in competition because what they were doing was so different from each other. But then there is that additional pressure that it has to be so different. And our curricula at higher education especially are very individualized. They're very much about giving a student artist the space to develop their own sense of the art. I don't think these, the people that I interviewed never expressed that they felt external pressure from the school to be original, but they did expect that during their education, they would be developing their own vocabulary and their own voice. And so among the things that felt like failures to them was when they didn't nail it, when they didn't manage to develop that thing specifically. I'm not sure where we take that. I'm not sure if it's relevant to alleviate that pressure. I wonder if contemporary circus schools are a place where someone could go to learn repertoire. I don't know if we're set up that way. No. That's the end of my question. My question is more questions. Back to you. Yeah.
I also wanted to ask, so you did the research in English.
Correct.
And I was wondering about the intercultural aspect of it. Mm-hmm. The previous students, the alumni that you were interviewing, if English was not always their native language, did you feel that a concept of the creativity or the others that when you did a sort of analysis of the concepts in the interviews, did you face the challenge that the same concepts doesn't have the same meaning with different cultural backgrounds, or by using English as a foreign language, different wordings would mean the same thing? Or, how did you deal with the fact that you interviewed people for whom necessarily that language or the cultural background would be different?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question as well. I would say this goes to research methodology, and it is stuff that came up with my supervision team. And I will add to that also, I was pushed on the definition of creativity I used, because my team said, but is that relevant for circus? There's other definitions of creativity. There's collective creativities. And here are my rationales for those things for this research. And again, it's for this research. Here's the cool thing. If you disagree, do research, and then can you publish and cite me? Because that would be great. The Stockholm University of the Arts and DOC, the program has been in English the whole time. So everyone who does that program does it in English. There are some Swedes that do the program, but the vast majority of students are from more broadly in Europe, and we've had students also from Australia and the United States. And not really South America. We have some very specific funding criteria that unfortunately prohibit that. So to do the work in English made sense. People had been through this education in English. In terms of their definition of creativity, that was really interesting. Very few of them had the same definition of creativity. most of them described the feeling of being creative, not a definition of creativity when I asked about what it was. Several of them said that a school cannot teach creativity because it can't be measured, just flat out, even though they were demonstrating that they learned creativity in the way they were describing their own work. And some said that a school could teach creativity, but that they did not learn it at this school, even though they were also demonstrating creative methodology in their work. So I think, again, I come back to this question of, are we talking about artistic, like an artistic quality, or are we talking about problem formation and problem solutions? And it's why I worked with this definition of framing a problem and working with the frame of a problem. It's very individual. And my argument for using that particular definition is that we still are educating circus artists very individually. Like Marco was just saying, it's this question of, okay, how are you gonna get out into the world? Very few students are coming to us in groups. Occasionally we have a duo or trio. We've graduated a few quartets of teeterboard, but most students are coming as soloists. And so this individualistic definition of creativity seemed to me more appropriate for the working reality of a lot of these students. It may not be the way we want to go. Like, there are concepts of creative ecologies, creative communities, that I couldn't fit into this particular dissertation, this particular work. So if an aim in a circus education program is to foster an individual's capacity to navigate future problems, to apply the creative method to their future problems, to be ready to use that when they encounter problems and unknown situations, then the methods that I've described in this dissertation, or the things that came from our program, right? So the task-based cycle, also the way we do our degree work, and artistic research, the way the students got to validate their identity as artists through participation in building the program, being taken seriously as artists, and being taken seriously during their final degree presentations of artistic research. All of these ways helped them validate and verify their own ability to solve problems. But if one wanted to design a curriculum that had more to do with creative ecology and creative community, there might have to be other methods that are part of it. Yeah, so I think this is relevant, and it was appropriate to the context of this particular school. It was appropriate to the context of those students. I think that English was, I didn't tell them what the definition of creativity was. I asked for their own. So they didn't know that this was the definition I was using. In the interview protocol, I asked them to describe what they remembered about school. I asked them to describe things that went really well, things that were really challenging, any challenges they overcame. I asked them to describe their professional life, things that went really well, things that were challenging. I asked them to draw connections between what they learned in school and their professional life, and I asked them to define creativity. And I asked them also if they thought other people in their cohort were creative, and if they thought they themselves were creative. So those were the questions that framed it. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have time for one last question, if there is one. Two. Okay.
Good, 2 last questions.
I have a question for you. Do you think there is different ways to consider creativity between professional circus schools and youth or leisure circus schools? Do you think so?
I've been wondering about that, actually. I've been wondering about it quite a bit. The reason that I wanted to do research on higher education in Circus is because there's almost none. We describe some things, but there's very little education on arts pedagogies and in higher education. And I'm confident that we're teaching not only circus and not only creative methods, but many other things to the circus students there. I'm always wary when we say youth circus or even circus education that we don't specify what we're talking about. We make an assumption that we're using the same pedagogical methods, perhaps. But one could be in a youth circus program where there are 50 kids and they're all throwing scarves, and then one could be in a program where there are 5 and they're all doing individual disciplines, and they would be having really different experiences of circus. We sometimes are a little too general when we say circus, as if it's all the same experience. I'm sure that youth are learning a lot about their own capacity. I'm sure they're learning confidence. I'm sure they're learning how to stand within a group, not just stand out from a group, but be part of a group without being on a competitive team. It could be that a youth program would like to really focus on creativity outcomes. I'm not sure it's as relevant at that stage. I think youth are already more creative than those of us that aren't in that practice all the time. Like, from science, we see that especially the very young their brains are already firing all the time trying to learn about what's going on in the world. They're scientists and problem solvers. I don't know if it's as relevant at that phase to be focusing on a curriculum that would encourage this type of definition of creativity. But definitely by working with play, by working with community, by working with social problem solving, all of those tools are being set up for the future, I thought.
Thank you. And that was one last question, I guess, there.
Hi. Hi, Alisan. It's not a fully formed question yet, but it kind of zooms right out from some of the things you said about, because we're in circus education, and I think we all know somehow for us the value of education in circus and where it's all leading to. But the thing that we're confronted by a lot is sort of the attitudes towards circus within society. And is there any kind of research that you can point to that speaks to how do we re-educate the world about circus? Because we all know the value of what we're doing, and we sort of see something and we're like, oh, we're sort of so marinating in it, and then we have this specific problems that you spoke of, like the circus and the trick and the attention economy nature of that. Like, does it always have to be new? Does it always have to be amazing? Does it always have to be spectacular? And what would be the opposite of that is like, what's the opposite of spectacular and amazing? It's kind of boring, or,
Right.
durational, or so I think we sort of know what we're doing in a way, but then there's this kind of macro, there's the high arts and the people that are like, well, circus isn't really art, and circus is a dying art form, and so it's looking for the answer to the re-education of like how other art forms view circus.
Yeah, I love this question, and this is a great question to end with. So if I kind of summarize, it's that when we say circus, as we're sitting here, we're talking about one kind of thing. And when we say circus to those other people, they're talking about a different kind of thing. And how do we bridge that gap? And one of the risks I think we have is we want to distance ourselves. Contemporary circus says we're not classical circus, we're not that. And that people are disappointed when there's no more elephants and clowns and what they were expecting from circus. But if we take a step back, let's think about how successful classical circus has been at influencing the archetype of what it is. It's an imagination of being in a place of mystery and power and joy and confusion. The space of the circus tent, the way that the acts come together, the smells and the sights and the sounds. This has been hugely successful all over the world. And it leaves a really important legacy. And it's true that the dramaturgies of traditional circus don't resonate with as many people. And it's true that now that we're beyond the Industrial Revolution, where we were really excited about dominating the natural world, and so we were excited about seeing horses and bears and animals being dominated by humans because it was part of this representation of how well humans are doing in the world. Now it's really terrifying. We're like, no, put that bear back into the wild. I don't want to see that. Those are all responsive to what we're living right now. And so I would say, I think we don't have to differentiate. We don't have to say we're doing something new. We have to stand on the shoulders of giants, and we have to be thoughtful about how we're carrying the baton forward. And I want to end with an example of two of the students from our graduating class right now. We did an exercise in their second year where we had two books. One was Thinking Through Circus, which was produced in Belgium, and the other one was from the Smells Like Circus people. And one was The Contemporary Circus, edited by Patrick Leroux and Katie Lavers and John Burt, where they interviewed circus artists. So one was articles written by people in practice, and the other was interviews with practitioners that had been turned into academic themes. And I asked the students to pick one chapter from each book that they liked, and to read one chapter from each book. And then we also got to go to Osh that year, and I asked them to pick a show, and to then write a presentation based on connecting those three things, the two chapters, the show they saw, and also what they wanted to accomplish in circus, where they saw themselves. And then they were invited to either do only an oral presentation of that, or to also include it as part of, to make it into their task for the presentation that we were doing that week. And it was an open task. It was like pick your own thing. So they could pick anything they wanted, or they could pick this. And what stuck with me was two students specifically. One student said, I'd never been to French circus, and I keep hearing all this great stuff about French circus, and I was really unimpressed that there was nothing really political and nothing that really moved me, and I was expecting to see a lot more of social action. And so I realized I probably have to do that. So I'm going to do a presentation that's about four experiences of discrimination I've had. And I want feedback from the audience about the way my act connects to that theme, but I do not want any feedback from the audience about the specific content, because that will be too difficult for me. But I'm really interested now in exploring what it is for me, myself, to be doing activist circus. Awesome, first of all. Great boundaries on feedback as well. Another student said, so I'm at the Osh Festival, and I read these different things about artists that really want to be working in, social justice and all these different aspects, and it just doesn't resonate with me. I'm looking around going, man, these shows cost a lot. If you're going to bring a whole family to these shows, that's a big investment, and I really want people to have fun. I want to be on stage, and I want them to be able to forget about whatever else is going on, and I just want to have fun on stage. And no disrespect to anyone who wants to really deal with social things, but what I want to do is just let people escape, and that's what I want to focus on. And so I think these two pieces, I was so proud of the students. I think these two pieces also help us say, okay, we don't have to all be one thing, but it does help us to be able to articulate what it is we're doing, for whom and why. What are the motivations? And it doesn't have to be different from the clowns and elephants and the legacy that we have that is amazing and complicated, because the circus has also done a lot of damage, right? And the way that we've behaved within circus has done a lot of damage. We don't have to distance ourselves. What we have to do is find a way that we're bringing it forward and with us, and then invite people in to continue to be part of that. That's what I think.
Thank you so much, Alison.